He vanished, was declared. Then called me. From my own phone number. My name is Marcus Ellery. I'm 42 years old, and I haven't slept properly in 2 years. Not since my younger brother, Evan, vanished during a hiking trip in the Colorado Rockies. His body was never found, but the authorities found his shredded backpack, blood on a cliff edge, and his broken phone a mile downhill. After a month-long search, they declared him presumed. I remember the day I got the call. August 12th, 2023. The police officer's voice was clinical, detached, like reading a weather report. He likely fell. There were mountain lion tracks nearby. We can't say for sure. I screamed. Not because he was gone, but because I never got to say goodbye. Evan wasn't just my brother. He was my best friend. My twin flame, despite being born 5 years apart. Fast forward 2 years. I tried to move on grief counseling, therapy, medication. I still visited the trailhead every year on the anniversary, lighting a candle and whispering into the woods like an idiot. This year was different. It happened at 2:17 a.m. I remember because I jolted awake to the vibrating hum of my phone on the nightstand. Half asleep, I reached for it. I almost dropped it when I saw the name. May. It was my number calling. I answered with a trembling hello. Static. Breathing. A low scraping sound like something dragging. Then a voice crackled and broke in, whispering my name. Marcus, help me. I bolted upright in bed. The line went dead. I stared at the screen until it dinned. My heart was pounding so hard it felt like it might burst through my chest. I tried calling back, but it rang once, then switched to voicemail. I checked my call log. It was there incoming, me 2:17 a.m. I checked my backup phone. Same time, no missed call. I checked the mirror. I was pale as a ghost. Then came the second blow. As I set the phone down, a new voicemail appeared. It had no timestamp. No number. Just a red icon in the word unknown. I tapped it and Evan's voice filled the room. Not the wheezing, broken voice from the call, but his real voice. Marcus, I don't have long. It's not what you think. They lied. You have to find the cabin. You remember it, don't you? The cabin from when we were kids. It's the only way. Then silence. I stared at the screen like it might bite me. The cabin? That place wasn't real. It was from a dream we both shared as kids, a dream that always ended with a locked door and blood on the floor. I didn't know whether to call the cops or a priest, but deep down I knew what I had to do. I had to go back to Colorado, to find a dream, to find Evan. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, the voice echoed in my mind, swelling with static. I could still feel the heavy weight of those words pressing against my chest. Find the cabin. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that it wasn't just a random memory. It was a key. I spent hours combing through old photos, flipping through every picture of Evan and me from when we were kids to the last family vacation we'd taken. There was a photo of us standing outside the cabin, our faces frozen in a rare moment of peace. The picture was taken when we were about 12. Our parents had rented a cabin in the woods for a weekend getaway. It had always been a place of mystery for us, surrounded by eerie stillness. But I never thought much of it at the time. The photo was worn, corners bent, but I could still see the building in the background. A small wooden cabin nestled between towering trees, its windows dark and inviting. It wasn't far from the trail where Evan had gone missing. In fact, it was only a few miles away. But that meant nothing. If I wanted to follow through on this insane lead, I would have to get there alone. I packed my things and drove through the night, avoiding the main highways to minimize attention. As I neared the Rockies, the landscape felt foreign. I had been here so many times with Evan, but now it felt like a place of secrets, of buried truth. The forest felt alive with whispers. The winds picked up, tugging at the edges of my sanity, as if warning me to turn back. But I couldn't. I reached the area by morning, the cabin's location firmly etched in my mind. The sun had risen, casting long shadows over the dense trees. I parked my truck at the base of a small hill, looking out at the woods in front of me. This is it, I thought. The air was damp, heavy with the scent of pine. The silence was profound, so much so that it seemed unnatural. As I ventured deeper into the woods, the trees close in around me like silent watchers. Every crack of a twig underfoot sounded amplified. As though someone was following me, I shook off the feeling, dismissing it as nerves. After what felt like an eternity, I finally saw a small clearing ahead. Through the trees, I glimpsed the cabin. The same cabin from the photo, but it was different now. Darker. Decay had taken over, the wood peeling away like old skin. The door was ajar, creaking in the wind as though beckoning me in. I approached cautiously, my every step deliberate. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up as I crossed the threshold. The inside was cold, musty. The air felt stale, as if it hadn't been disturbed in years. Then I sought the symbol carved into the floor. A circle with a strange rune inside. It was exactly as I remembered from that childhood dream Evan and I shared. I stepped forward, my foot tapping against the floor, and the symbol seemed to pulse with an unnatural energy. I dropped to my knees and traced the mark with my fingers. I didn't know what was happening, but I could feel a dark presence in the room, watching me. A chill ran down my spine. Something wasn't right. Before I could move, the door slammed shut behind me, and the room was plunged into darkness. I wasn't alone. Panic surged through me as the door slammed shut. I jumped to my feet, my heart racing. My breath came in shallow gasps, the sound of it deafening in the thick silence. I fumbled for my flashlight, but it was useless. My hands were trembling too much. My mind screamed at me to leave to run, but my body refused to obey. The air in the cabin felt suffocating, heavy with something I couldn't name. The darkness pressed in from all sides, like it had a life of its own. I could feel it moving, watching. My skin crawled, and I had the distinct feeling that I was being surrounded by something not human, not even of this world. I spun around, shining the beam of my flashlight into the corners of the room. Nothing. Just the remnants of old furniture and the decaying walls. The smell of damp wood and something else, something metallic, lingered in the air. I felt as though the walls themselves were closing in. Etten? I called out, my voice trembling. There was no answer, only the distant sound of something dragging across the floor behind me. My blood ran cold. I spun hard, hammering, but there was nothing there. I turned the flashlight around the room again, more frantically this time, but the shadows seemed to stretch and shift unnaturally in the beam. We're losing it, Marcus. You're just imagining things. There's no one here. But I couldn't shake the feeling. The presence. It was real. The flashlight flickered, and for a split second I saw a figure in the corner of the room. Not a figure. A shadow. It was tall, dark, and formless, yet it seemed to stretch unnaturally toward me, its shape distorting with every pulse of light. It didn't have eyes, but I could feel its gaze. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. It was like the very air was being sucked out of the cabin. And then I heard it. A whisper. So faint I almost missed it. But it was there. Marcus. I froze. The voice was unmistakable. It was Evan's voice. But it wasn't right. It was garbled, disordered, like something was trying to choke it out. Evan? I whispered, my voice barely audible. The shadow seemed to grow, curling around the walls like smoke. The temperature dropped suddenly, and I could see my breath forming in the air. I reached for my phone, but it was gone, vanished from my pocket. My heart sank. I stumbled backward, my foot catching on something. I fell hard onto the floor, pain shooting up my spine. But as I pushed myself up, I noticed something. The floor wasn't empty anymore. The symbol had changed. The rune inside the circle had shifted, morphing into something different. It looked like a warning, a curse, a message. Before I could make sense of it, the door swung open again with a violent gust of wind. I didn't hesitate. I ran. As I bolted through the door, I could hear the whisper again, louder this time, closer. Marcus, you shouldn't have come back. I didn't stop to look. I ran through the woods, the cold air biting at my skin, the sound of something chasing me echoing in the distance. The trees seemed to close in, but I kept going, heart pounding, feet stumbling over the uneven ground. I couldn't understand it, none of this made sense. And yet, as I ran, I realized the truth. Evan had never been lost in the mountains. He had been drawn here, to the cabin, to this place. And now I was too. I don't remember much of the next few hours. I stumbled through the woods, panic consuming me, until I finally collapsed near the base of the mountainside. My body was exhausted, my mind spinning with disbelief. The shadows, the whispers, they felt too real to ignore. But my rational mind screamed at me that I was overreacting. I had to go back, get some answers. The problem was, I didn't know what those answers would be. I didn't understand what I'd just seen or heard or felt. It was as if the fabric of reality itself had torn open, and I glimpsed something else. When I finally regained my composure, I made the decision to head back to the cabin. There was no other choice. I had to face whatever this thing was, whatever was trying to keep me from the truth. As I approached the cabin once more, I noticed something unsettling. There were no tracks. No signs that anyone or anything had followed me. The ground should have been disturbed, especially after my frantic dash, but it was pristine, untouched. I stood at the threshold, staring at the cabin with dread in my chest. It was the same, yet different. The air felt thick, oppressive. The door hung slightly ajar, like an invitation to an unknown fate. I couldn't just stand there. I had to know what was happening. Inside, the darkness felt heavier than before, pressing against me with an almost physical force. The flashlight was still dead, but I knew I couldn't rely on it. The light from the outside world had no place in this house, not in the presence of whatever dwelled within. I moved cautiously, every step making the floor creak beneath me. It felt like the cabin was alive in a way that no building should be. The walls seemed to pulse with a deep, unsettling hum. My eyes darted to the symbol on the floor again. It had changed again. This time, it was no longer a rune, it was a name. Evan. I froze, staring at the etched letters, the old wood beneath them seeming to breathe. There was no mistaking it. That name, it had never been there before. I knew it hadn't. My pulse quickened as I knelt to examine it more closely. The wood felt warm under my fingertips, and as I traced the letters, a chill ran through me. A sound, barely audible, began to fill the room. It was like a low, mournful hum rising from deep within the earth. It wasn't just a sound, it was felt, vibrating in my bones. Suddenly, the temperature in the cabin dropped. I exhaled, and my breath came out in visible clouds of mist. My heart began to race again. I stood up, taking a few steps back, when I saw it. A shadow flickered at the edge of the room. For a moment, I thought it was just a trick of the light. But then I saw it clearly, a tall, thin figure, draped in shadows, standing in the doorway. It wasn't human. There was something else, something wrong. I opened my mouth to scream, but no sound came out. The figure moved slowly toward me, its feet barely touching the ground. With every step it took, the air around it grew colder. My body locked in place, paralyzed with fear. The figure's head turned, and I saw its face, or what was left of it. It was a hollow, featureless mask, but in its empty sockets there was something dark, something that made my stomach twist. I stumbled backward, my hands grasping at the walls for support, but there was nowhere to run. The figure reached out, its long, skeletal fingers brushing against my skin, cold as ice. Evan. The words slipped from my lips, barely a whisper. But the figure didn't respond. Instead, it tilted its head, its hollow eyes seeming to widen in recognition. It was familiar. And then, just as quickly as it had appeared, it vanished into thin air. My heart was pounding in my chest as I stumbled to the floor, gasping for breath. The room felt emptier than before, the silence suffocating. But it was then that I realized something. The figure wasn't gone. It was still here, hiding in the corners, in the darkness. Watching. Waiting. It was waiting for me to make the next move. To uncover the truth. To uncover what happened to Evan. I didn't know how much longer I could stay in that cabin. My mind was fraying at the edges, caught between what I'd seen and what I couldn't explain. The figure, the coldness, the sudden appearance of Evan's name, it all felt like pieces of a puzzle that didn't belong in this world. But I couldn't walk away now. I had already crossed the line. There was no turning back. I stood up slowly, my legs unsteady beneath me. The walls seemed to be closing in, their crooked lines twisting like they were alive, trying to swallow me whole. The air was thick, heavier than it had been before, and the silence felt wrong to complete, like the world had paused just for me. I tried to focus, tried to push the panic down long enough to think clearly. Why was I here? What was the connection between Evan's disappearance and this cabin? It hit me like a hammer. That name. The one carved into the floor. Evan. When I was a child, I had always had strange dreams. Vivid dreams about a cabin in the woods, this very cabin, though I didn't know it at the time. In those dreams, Evan and I would be running through the forest, always just ahead of something dark that was chasing us. The dreams always ended the same way, with us trapped in the cabin, a shadow looming over us, but never fully revealing itself. This was that dream. The cabin. The shadow. The whispers. They were all part of the same nightmare that had followed me into adulthood, but I never made the connection until now. This wasn't just some abandoned structure. This was a place tied to something else, something from our past that neither Evan nor I ever fully understood. I was so lost in my thoughts that I didn't hear the noise at first, the soft scratching against the door, the slow tapping, like someone was trying to get in. My breath caught in my throat. I turned toward the door, heart pounding. The tapping continued. It wasn't the wind. It wasn't an animal. It was deliberate, methodical. I knew what I had to do. I had to open the door. I had to face whatever was waiting on the other side. I took a step forward, my hand trembling as I reached for the handle. The second I touched it, the door flew open with a violent rush of wind and I stumbled backward, nearly falling over. And then I saw him. Evan. But not the Evan I remembered. This version of him was wrong. His eyes were hollow, his face pale and gaunt, as though he hadn't eaten or slept in months. His skin was stretched tight across his bones, and his clothes were torn, dirty, as if he'd been wandering in the woods for far too long. His hair was matted, his lips cracked and dry. Evan? I whispered, my voice barely a breath. He stared at me with those empty eyes, but he didn't speak. He just stood there, silent. My legs were shaking so badly I had to grab onto the doorframe to stay standing. I wanted to run. I wanted to escape, but I couldn't. I needed to know the truth. Where have you been? What happened? I asked, my voice desperate, cracking under the weight of the moment. For a long moment, he didn't move. Then, finally, his mouth opened, but instead of words, a deep, guttural growl came from his throat. It wasn't him. It wasn't Evan at all. I stepped back, terrified, but then something strange happened. His eyes flickered just for a second. There was something in them, something that felt like my brother again. The old Evan. The one I'd lost. Help me, Marcus. The voice was weak, strained, as though he was speaking through something else, something that was choking him. I didn't know what to do. My brother was standing in front of me, but he wasn't himself. He was possessed, trapped inside some force I couldn't comprehend. I never left, he whispered, his voice barely audible. I've been waiting for you, to find me. I couldn't take it anymore. The world around me felt like it was collapsing. I reached out to touch him, to pull him back from whatever was keeping him trapped in this twisted version of himself. But as my hand touched his arm, he shifted. His body contorted, and in an instant, the darkness engulfed him. His skin stretched, his limbs cracking and elongating like they were made of rubber. His eyes rolled back, and he screamed a sound that shattered the air. I had no choice but to run. The moment I turned to flee, I heard his voice, distorted and distant, echoing through the cabin. You should have stayed away, Marcus. You should have stayed away. I bolted for the door, but before I could reach it, the shadows closed in around me. I couldn't see. I couldn't breathe. And then, in the suffocating darkness, something whispered my name once more. But it wasn't Evan. It was something else. Something far older. I didn't know how long I had been running. Time had become a distant concept, slipping through my fingers like sand. I could feel the oppressive weight of the darkness bearing down on me, the shadows closing in tighter with every breath I took. My pulse raced in my ears, and each step seemed to sink me deeper into something I couldn't escape. The forest around me had become unrecognizable, shifting with every blink, the trees twisting into grotesque shapes, their bark like cracked skin, their branches clawing at the sky. I was lost. I didn't even know which direction I was headed. The wind howled like a living thing, biting at my face, carrying strange whispers that seemed to come from all around me, yet from nowhere at all. Every time I looked over my shoulder, I felt the cold presence of something watching me, something far older and darker than anything I had ever known. The cabin, I thought, my mind snapping back to the horror I had just witnessed. Ellen. No, that wasn't Evan. It wasn't him anymore. My brother's face, no. The thing that had looked like him had twisted, contorted in ways that defied nature, and nightmare made flesh. I had to understand. Why had he called me here? What did this place want from me? I stopped running and leaned against a tree, gasping for air. The cold had become unbearable, and the darkness was suffocating. I reached for my phone, of course. It was still gone, but I needed something to hold on to, some piece of reality to anchor me to the world I knew. The world that didn't make me feel like I was losing my mind. That's when I heard it. A voice. Soft, faint, but unmistakable. Marcus. I spun around, my heart leaping into my throat. There was no one there. The forest was empty. The air was still. I was completely alone. Yet the voice had sounded so real. So close. Evan? I whispered into the abyss, hoping, praying, that somehow my brother was still there, still fighting whatever force had taken him. No response. Just the wind and eerie silence. I took a few steps forward, the sense of dread growing with every movement. There was something in the distance, a light, faint, flickering like a candle. It beckoned to me. Without thinking, I began to move toward it, as if drawn by an unseen hand. The closer I got, the more distorted the forest became. The trees seemed to shift and sway unnaturally, their branches twitching like the fingers of unseen hands reaching for me. The ground beneath me felt wrong, shifting and soft, like it was swallowing me whole. And then, suddenly, I was there. The light. But it wasn't a candle. It was a fire. A massive bonfire burning in the center of a clearing. Flames twisted and danced in unnatural patterns, casting grotesque shadows that crawled along the ground. And around the fire were figures, humanoids, their features obscured by dark hoods and cloaks. They stood motionless, staring at the fire as if entranced. I froze, my heart hammering. I wanted to run, to hide, but my legs felt like lead. I couldn't move. I couldn't turn away. One of the figures turned toward me. His face was obscured by shadows, but I could feel its eyes on me, cold, empty eyes that seemed to pierce through my soul. Marcus Ellery, it whispered, its voice distorted, as though it came from far beneath the earth. You've come to the wrong place, but you can never leave. The figure stepped forward, and as it did, the others began to stir, their movement slow and deliberate. They didn't speak, but their presence was suffocating, like the air itself was thickening around me. The fire's flame seemed to grow higher, its heat pressing against my skin. Yet I didn't feel its warmth. Instead, I felt an icy chill creeping up my spine. The figure raised a hand, pointing directly at me. The world around me began to spin, the fire flickering like a dying star. This was it. The truth. The answer I had been seeking. I knew I was being pulled into something I couldn't understand, something that went far beyond Evan, beyond the cabin, beyond anything I had ever imagined. What is this? I managed to croak, my voice barely a whisper against the roaring silence. The figure's voice echoed in my mind, not just in my ears, but deep inside me, like it was speaking directly to my soul. You should have never come. You will never leave this place. Marcus, that's too late. You are part of us now. I felt my breath catch in my throat, my chest tightening. The figure's words hit me like a physical blow. crashing through me, sinking deep into my bones. And then, before I could process what was happening, the ground beneath me shifted. I stumbled, falling forward into the flames. But they didn't burn. Instead, they pulled me in, wrapping around me like tendrils, twisting around my body, pulling me deeper into the fire. I screamed, but the sound was swallowed by the darkness. And then, everything went silent. I was no longer in the clearing. No longer in the woods. I was somewhere else, somewhere wrong. And in the distance, I heard it again, the whisper of my name. Mark. But this time, it was different. It wasn't my brother calling me. It was something else. Something far older, far more ancient than anything I could comprehend. Something that had been waiting for me to become part of it. I woke up, but it didn't feel like waking. My body was heavy, pinned down by an unseen weight. The world around me was dark, but not the same suffocating darkness I'd felt before. This was a deep, primal blackness, thick like tar. I couldn't move, couldn't feel my limbs. I tried to open my mouth to scream, but nothing came out. It was as if the air itself had been stolen from me. I was trapped. I don't know how much time passed before I could move again. It was as if my body had been suspended in some kind of limbo. My senses dulled, my mind fractured. The stillness was oppressive, but there was a hum beneath it, low and vibrating, like the ground itself was alive. The hum was familiar, almost comforting in a strange way, but it was also suffused with something terrifying. I felt a sharp tug in my chest to pull, like a tether between my body and something far below. Slowly, reluctantly, I opened my eyes, the weight of it all pressing down on me. The ground beneath me was no longer forest floor or cabin floor, it was stone. Cold, smooth, and unyielding. I was lying on a slab of rock, and around me, the walls rose up like ancient tombs, dark and crumbling. But this was no cave. This place felt wrong. It was ancient, old in a way that nothing should be. And in the centre of the room yet, a massive black obelisk towering over me. It pulsed with a sickly, violet light, its surface covered in intricate, twisting symbols I didn't understand, but that felt familiar. The same symbols I had seen in the cabin. The same ones Evan had called me to. This was the heart of it all. And then I heard the voice. Marcus. It was soft, but it echoed through the room like a thunderclap, reverberating in my skull. My heart pounded in response, but I couldn't move. Welcome. The voice was different, now low, ancient, with a deep hollow timbre that seemed to draw its power from the earth itself. It wasn't Evan. It wasn't anything human. The voice continued, like it was speaking directly into my very essence. You are here because you belong here, your bloodline, your existence. You are not like the others, Marcus. You are our chosen. Chosen? The word echoed in my head like a sickening taunt. I couldn't comprehend it. I tried to sit up, to move away from the obelisk, but the moment I tried, my body froze. It wasn't fear, it was control. Something else had control of me. Suddenly, images flooded my mind, flashbacks to moments I had long buried. My childhood. My family. That cabin. The dreams. The whispers. It had all led me here. Evan had known. Evan had always known. It had always been about us, about our bloodline. The obelisk's pulsing intensified, and I felt something deep inside me stir a deep, primal power, rising from the depths of my being. My mind screamed in protest, but it was too late. It was as if the earth had opened up beneath me and swallowed me whole, and now something ancient was awakening within me. You are part of the sacrifice, the voice continued, a low rumble vibrating through my bones. Your brother was only the beginning. He gave his essence to our cause, and now, you will give yours. I felt the air grow thick with pressure, as if the walls themselves were closing in, pressing down on me, forcing the truth into my mind. It wasn't just Evan. It wasn't just the cabin or the forest or the darkness. It was everything. The bloodline I came from had been cursed long before I was born. My family was tied to this place, to this entity. And now I was the final piece. This was my purpose. I could hear Evan's voice again, but it wasn't the same. It wasn't distorted or desperate. It was calm, peaceful. I'm sorry, Marcus. I didn't want you to have to find out like this. I wanted to scream. I wanted to run. I wanted to tear myself away from the obelisk and never look back. But there was no escape. I had been drawn here. My brother had been drawn here. Fire, the symbols, the dreams, it was all part of an ancient plan. We weren't just victims. We were chosen to fuel whatever dark power thrived beneath the earth. I had to fight it. I had to resist. But the pull was too strong. The obelisk thrummed louder, vibrating in my chest. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't move. I could feel it now, the force, the presence, coursing through me like liquid darkness. It was consuming me. Welcome home, Marcus, the voice echoed in my mind, as everything I was, the man I had been, began to fade away. It's time for you to join us. And then, just as the last remnants of my consciousness began to slip into oblivion, I understood. I was no longer Marcus Ellery. I was a part of something much older. Something eternal. And I would never leave this place.